Okay, it's live. So this is Stephanie.
This is Sierra.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start our Amazing Grace. I guess I'll just do the first one.
Cool.
What doctrine in Wilbur's heart drove him to advocate? Why is the doctrine of the family so important to have in your heart, to be passionate and persistent? So what I found, or what I put, was the doctrine in Wilbur's heart was that God made all men equal. It is important to have the doctrine of family in your heart because that is what makes society stable. You need to be passionate and persistent in order to keep moving forward, no matter the roadblocks that might pop up in your way. If you aren't passionate, you will falter. You will end up someone that you cannot recognize when you gaze into the mirror. And in order to make the changes you want to make for a better society or world, you need to be willing to risk everything with your persistence. You need to be willing to keep your goal in your heart and mind all the time.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I put for that one that it drives the force to actually want to do something and I kind of tied it in with the class to save the children and families and to have a better future and not to lie in torment for the rest of your life knowing that you didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
That. So for the second question, I don't actually have the question, but I do have the answer. I put Wilbur did seem to actually use his own systems in his life. The people who influenced a higher government to choose or to get to change what was happening and took the time to seriously change the hearts of those who opposed him. It then led to his macro system eventually passing his law to allow the abolition of slavery in some parts.
Yeah, I did the same, especially with the macro system. I talked about how he was able to change the minds of his fellow people, and brought after the war and was able to make the abolishment of slavery pass.
Yeah.
And yeah, I talked about how he used friends and peers, church groups, and to make the changes slowly, but eventually.
With the higher people in the government.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, so for the third one, how did Wilbur and his fellow advocates do and share their research? What evidence did they provide to persuade those opposing or on the fence? Okay, so I put Wilbur had petitions signed, and he showed the signatures to the House of Commons. He and his associates had badges made up for people to wear to show their support. They also brought a boat full of people to a slave trading ship that had reached port a couple days ago. They had the people smell the repugnant odor of disease and death, which I think was a major turning point because I didn't even realize how bad those were until I saw the video, and I can't even imagine literally like how bad that would smell.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So I put the advocates dealt with facts. They stated how many people died. They stated how many were actually willing to be slaves. And they gave reports and testimonies to show what the slaves were facing. They talked about how the slaves were treated and what kind of harsh conditions they lived in.
Yeah. I took a more emotional turn on the question. I said that Wilbur captured the hearts and ears of his listeners by singing the famous Amazing Grace. He took the emotional side of things to plead with his listeners to at least hear him out and to at least look at the basics before choosing a side on things.
He did. I didn't even think about the Amazing Grace being an emotional part of getting people to listen to it. Good catch.
Thanks. So the fourth one here, again, I don't have the question, but I do have the answer. I said that the film portrays a certain importance to group work because without a group, it seems it is harder to accomplish anything. By getting more and more people interested in his plight, Wilbur is able to convince the court that slavery is a bad thing. Group work is important to me because I feel that it brings us all together in our fight for a better tomorrow. I feel like I'm a part of something greater that will come to pass in the future.
Yeah, no, I was very close to that too. You know, with having a group, you have new ideas, different perspectives, and it's easier to see the bigger picture that way. So you don't get focused on little details because there's somebody be like, maybe not that way, just do it this way.
Yeah.
So it is easier, and film does portray that where they have all the different perspectives and they figure out which way would be the best way to get people to change their minds. To get people to be like, oh yeah, slavery's not a good thing.
Yeah.
And and then for me, it is easier sometimes to be in a group just because you have that thinking system where you can bounce off ideas off each other until you come with a cohesive, let's do this. Yeah. And then I also put along, like it shows in the film, that you don't have to agree with everything your group decides you want to do or every idea, but you do have to be tolerant of their ideas and like really think about it and be like, okay, I guess I can see where that would be the best way to do it, or no, I don't think that might work because of this, but you still have to do it in a considerate, tolerant way.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, and it did show that in the show, but it also did show non-tolerant ways, but that's more, against the other side, not so much in their little group.
Yeah.
Oh, and also if you're in a group, you don't have to do it by yourself, because if you're going to advocate for slavery, it's best to be in a group, because if you're going to try to take that on by yourself, I mean, that would be so overwhelming alone.
Yep. I agree. Especially with a big idea and advocacy like that.
Yeah. Okay, so number 5.
You think you'll be done in the next 30 minutes? Done enough in the next 30 minutes? I'm still right back here.
Sorry, roommate.
No worries. I get it. So what parallels do you see between Wilbur and Captain Moroni in Alba 46? What is a Christian and professional family advocate, and how did Wilbur exemplify that? How can he be effective and Christ-like against such loud and often degrading voices? So I put Wilbur and Captain Moroni both took up charge against those who forsake God. They wanted best for all people. A Christian and professional family advocate are people who want everyone to be equal. They realize everyone brings something new or different to the board. Wilbur exemplified being a Christian and advocate by realizing that slaves were no different. They were humans who brought their different perspectives to the world. We can be effective and Christ-like by not yielding to the general consensus. We cannot let them talk. We can let them talk, but we can't let them influence us when we know it's wrong.
I like that. I said that the parallels of Wilbur to Moroni are that Wilbur finally just had it and let it all out, and just kind of like Moroni, how he couldn't take seeing all these people doing these horrible things, just like in slavery in the situation, and how Wilbur couldn't take watching or thinking about these people doing inhumane things to these slaves and shipping them back and forth, and looking at their shipping conditions really did it for him too. And I feel like we just need to take the time in space and take that kind of little opening of space to get our voices out there.
Yeah, they did. They both were like they could only take so much before it was too much.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
feel like that is nowadays too. We can only take so much before we have to say something nowadays as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree. Are we on 6?
Yes.
Is that the one? I said I feel like Wilbur exemplified the emotional side of public speaking. He spoke loud and with passion once he knew that some of his fellow comrades were with him in his fight for his advocacy for slavery.
Yeah, I took the more factual side.
Mm-hmm.
I did do the emotional though, because I did put that they actually had a former slave write a book about what his life was like as a slave, and that is more the emotional with facts in it. That's probably horrifying to read.
Yeah.
Just seeing it. I also put they you used words, like people, and they asked different questions, different scenarios that would put the person they were asking the questions into that situation and see how their compassion level differed depending on what they think they were thinking, and then if they were in that situation, what would they want to happen. And I also put that they also knew that if they had someone boring read out the law, that it was more likely to get passed because people would overlook it, because I'm not going to listen to somebody that boring. I'm going to sleep instead. Yeah. And they use that to their advantage with in the movie, because they realized that. They're like, okay, I know who we're going to have read this. Nobody will notice.
Yes.
So, I thought that was pretty smart, because they did exemplify that idea of if it's boring, people are less likely to notice.
That's true.
Okay, so number 7. What role did the government, policy, and religious freedom play in the fight of the slave trade? Did you see the political system being pro-family? Why or why not? So I saw government policy played a big role in the fight against slave trade. Most people with influence had a hand in the slave trade and didn't want to lose that source of income. A policy was worded to be a way to change the slave trading, but the bill had nothing to do with slave trading. The bill had to be disguised in order to even be heard amongst the House of Commons. I feel like the political system was against being pro-family. I feel just because, they ripped families apart to make them slaves, and they didn't see what was wrong with, forcing people away from their homes. And then, like in general, they just didn't seem to be very, family oriented. And then religious people didn't seem to be all that concerned about the slave trade, especially during the war, because I guess they figured we had more pressing matters to deal with, which, I guess I could see that point of view, but at the same time, it's kind of right in your backyard too, so.
Yeah. I said a lot of things. I said that the role that the government had on advocacy of slave trade was that it was a deciding factor in shutting it all down. That system could work so well in pro-family situations, I think, which is probably why they're a lot more against it than they were for it. Unfortunately, because the government was on the other side, Wilbur had to do everything he could to get them to see that other side of what he was seeing, and eventually get the government to change their mind. And apparently, in order to do that, Wilbur needed to pass on, which is to say that people finally start to listen and to actually rethink and care after his death. And it's sometimes sad, but true. But Yeah.
No, it is true. I mean, a lot of great poets and, read authors and stuff. Nobody liked any of their stuff until after they passed on.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's true for some of the advocates too. Nobody really listened until they're like, oh, what was that person again?
Yeah.
I wanted this.
Yeah.
Okay. So number
Okay.
8.
8?
Yeah.
Um,
I that's yours. Never mind.
Oh, you're good. I feel like he used his time on Earth very well, even though there were more things that he could have done. But they honored his death, which was nice. He was a very emotional, again, grabbing speaker, and that kind of is the same with Elder Christofferson in a way. They're both kind of emotional speakers, in my sense, but that's kind of how I related it.
I agree with you. I totally think that he used his time wisely. I mean, he was actually able to find a wife. He had children. He led the cause to abolish slavery.
Mm-hmm.
He did follow God to the best of his abilities at that time. He labored in the House of Commons to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And he took time to take a break in order to get his head back on straight because he had that those health scares, the health issues.
Yeah.
And he took a break. He was like, okay, I'm gonna back out for a little bit in order to rethink everything, and then I'll come back and help again.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
I like it.
Okay, so number 9. So any other profound thoughts or personal insights from the movie that are related to child and family advocacy? So I got Wilbur is asked, do you plan to use your beautiful voice to praise the Lord or to change the world? My thoughts are, can't he do both? Can't he praise the Lord while changing the world? And I think he kind of did, in a sense, do that. And I think everybody can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then men and women have so much to offer each other because the woman he marries, and she's kind of the reason why he was able to get his head back on straight. She was able to be that support system, that pillar of strength for him to really do what he needed to do to abolish slavery. And persistence and passion pay off if you keep working at it.
I like that. I liked the quote from his wife. I'm not sure if it was his lady friend or wife. I don't remember if they got married or not. But she said, if someone has a sour taste in their mouth, shouldn't they want to spit it out and not swallow it back down? And I found that was an interesting take on how we need to actually take the time to spit out what we need to in order to advocate and actually do something about how we feel on threats to the family.
Well, that's a really good quote. I think they did get married.
I think so. I'm not quite sure if it was her or another girl, but
yeah.
Oh well. And then we're on 10.
Yeah.
My understanding of the doctrine of the family was just a joke, and thinking that it wasn't that big of a deal at first. But after looking at all the threats and the things that can hurt and harm a family, and after seeing the value of family people have, I feel it's of utmost importance to have a family, just to be able to get you through this life, because life can be very cruel if you don't watch out, and it will bite you in the butt.
True.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I was the same. I was like, hey, family, that's cool. But
Yeah.
it's not like a big priority right now for me.
Mm-hmm.
After doing the class, I'm like, oh, no, it kind of should be a priority for me.
Yeah, same.
Because, men and women, we're each other's pillars. We get the strength from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know how important it is now to find a spouse and to start the family and be that, stable part of society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And be each other's grounding forces.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Okay, so 11. Picture your spouse and children, current or future, and write down some thoughts about how they will benefit from you taking this class. So I put they'll benefit by my knowledge of being persistent and passionate in the changes of the world. They'll benefit from me wanting to help to build a better world for them to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And I will be more willing to actually like stop and listen to what is going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that. I put my future spouse and children can benefit from taking this class by having a feeling of belonging and understanding as to how to go about advocating for the things that they love and the things that they love to do. I think that it's a class of self-fulfillment and purpose to think of the bigger picture and not just to focus on the smaller things of life.
Good.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're good. Or do you have anything else to add?
Nope. Okay.
Okay, I think we're good then. I will email this broadcast to the professor.
Perfect.
Okay, have a nice